Good afternoon in New York and Eastern North America. Good morning, Los Angeles and the western parts. Good evening in Barcelona, Europe, Israel, Africa. And welcome whatever time of day or night for all who are joining us from all corners of the world today. I'm Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you for joining our webinar, 80 years after Auschwitz, second and third generation sons reflect on Holocaust legacies of the girls from Salonika, their mother, grandmother, in their own lives. This International Center for the Study, Prevention, and Treatment of Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma is held in advance of tomorrow, January 27, International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Just 50 Holocaust survivors will be at Auschwitz for the 80th anniversary of its liberation tomorrow. Called a fading generation, as of January 2024, approximately 245,000 Holocaust survivors were living worldwide. Their global distribution was as follows. In Israel, nearly 119,300 survivors, accounting for approximately 49% of the global survivor population. United States, approximately 34,400 survivors, representing about 16% of the total. Western Europe, around 44,100 survivors, making up 18% of the global total. Former Soviet Union countries, about 29,400 survivors, constituting 12% of the total. Canada, over 7,400 survivors. Australia, over 7,400 survivors. Our webinar focuses on the legacies of one Greek survivor, the girl from Salonika, Mazel Tov Fofo Mordor. Following viewing the documentary, her son, David, and grandson, Carlos, will reflect on having lived with her Holocaust, particularly Auschwitz, legacies, and producer-director of the film, Alison Jayne Wilson, will reflect on making the film with them. Your moderator, I am a clinical psychologist, traumatologist, victimologist, and psychohistorian, having developed the first program to help Nazi Holocaust survivors and their children in the 1970s. I have devoted much of my career to studying, treating, writing about, and preventing lifelong and multi-generational impacts of massive trauma worldwide, to ensuring victims' rights, the rights of future generations, and to reparative justice. You can find a whole lot of excellent information about all this on our website. For me, psychohistory explores history as it is lived today, not only as a series of dates, events, and names, but as it shapes our choices and our ways of being now. Our first presenter today, after viewing the documentary, David Shmuel Mordor Beha, David was born in Athens, Greece, and grew up in Belo Horizonte, Brazil, before moving with his family to Lloret de Mar, Spain, in the 1960s. He studied journalism and pursued a career in music journalism and the family business. Now retired, he dedicated his time to music. He dedicates, his time to music, travel, and maintaining his music blog. Both of his parents were Greek Holocaust survivors. David's son, Carlos Mordo Monforte, is our second presenter. Carlos, the grandson of Mazel Tov for Mordo, is a psychology graduate with extensive experience in the social sector. He currently works with Amical de Mauthausen y Otros Campos, a Spanish foundation committed to preserving and disseminating the history of Spanish Republicans deported to Nazi concentration camps. Last but definitely not least is Alison Jayne Wilson. Alison is an award-winning filmmaker known for her unflinching human rights documentaries. Exit and The Girl From Salonika have garnered international recognition, with Exit premiering at San Diego International Film Festival and The Girl From Salonika supported by the Claims Conference grant. A sought-after speaker, having presented at the Cambridge Symposium on Human Trafficking, and more. She's currently developing 2 documentaries on POWs and victims from the MENA region. We have an hour and a half for the webinar, although we have been known to have the most engaging audience who keeps us longer. Following the Girl from Salonika, each of the panelists will speak for about 8 minutes. After an interchange among us, I will open the floor to question and answers from the audience. Please direct your questions or brief comments to particular panelists or to the whole panel. We will then conclude with last words. I now have the pleasure, with its makers, of sharing The Girl from Salonika with you. Thank you, all 3 of you, for making this film. David, we said that you will be the first presenter today after the film. You can take a time to take a deep breath too before. But when you're ready, the screen is yours.
Yes, I'm ready. Okay. I didn't prepare much, and most of what I would say really has been said already in the movie. So my mother did not explain me that much. She was always trying to, but emotionally she was not ready. And maybe just after my dad died, I remember she was already years old, and she only kept the things she thought she could conserve. So I don't know really. I can talk about my experience in Brazil, which is I think it's a big part of my education, because from 2-year-old to 10-year-old, they came from Brazil because my father had a cousin, and he went to Belo Horizonte, and things were not going well in Greece. economically. And well, they took the chance to go, and they were sharing as a partner a shirt factory, very small, and then they opened a shop in Brazil. It was the 1960, 1959 job for the workers, and outside Brazilian Núcleo Bandeirante. And he used to go to Brasilia and come back to Belo Horizonte every 15 days. It's Isaac Menashe, and I grew up with his sons Leon Menashe and Betty Bella Menashe, and he was not very happy with his life because in Brazil things were okay, but it was a hard life. I mean, we were living in a poor area, not a poor area, but quite a simple area, up in a hill in Santa Teresa area, which they had water cuts and lasted for maybe a week, and then you get the water like at 2 a.m. and you have to fill the barrels, and it was a tropic in the 50s life, but with some commodities from Brazil, because Brazil was in some things better than Spain, because Brazil used to look to United States. They had some, like we had psychologists, and in Spain there was not really psychologists at the time. And when my mom lost the baby, she was pregnant. She had the baby 5 months. He lasted only 1 day, died. Then she got depressed, and she needed a psychologist. And she was very fortunate to have a good psychologist, I think, because this girl, Doctora Aspasia, I don't remember the surname, she taught her how to cope with the situation and not pass it to me. Her sadness was, she didn't show me so much sadness about these things. I knew later. And I think she taught her how to deal with my education too, about which age she should tell me or not tell me. And in Brazil, she didn't really talk about this because I was very young. And she put me in we were in a school, whose name is Escola Israelita Brasileira. And it was like a class with 9 other girls and boys. And it was a very happy childhood for me. I think what she says in the movie about she was fortunate to have a happy infance, she passed it to me. So I think I was a happy child, and things well changed when we came to Spain. I was already 10 years old. Then they met with the Jewish people from Barcelona. We were not synagogue people, right? We were Jewish, but they used to gather together every Sunday, play some poker or some Remy, and talk about things. They used to be, in fact, about my mom. She never. I learned more about the concentration camp, about Auschwitz, through a friend of my mom. It was a man named Joseph Joe Casuto. He was in Auschwitz with her. He survived, and he used to get money from German government, and he never worked really. He got a Canadian passport. And he came to Brazil to visit us. He came to Spain to visit us, and he was a pretty communist guy, but he was very funny. And when he used to speak to me about Auschwitz, he was always like in a funny mood, like how they used to go to the garbage to get some potatoes from all these things, how they used to sell the Germans pressed wood instead of tobacco, and things like this. They used, how they used to manage to survive in the camp, but in a funny way. never getting into the real problem. That's it. I don't know what else I must say. I know she when about the experience of being a mother, which was his main thing in life. She used to. One day she got me in a car coming from. I was taking her to a doctor coming back. She had a cancer, and she was in treatment. She was okay, but she started to tell me about all the problems she had, but in a very simple way. But I remember that she spoke about how she was very grateful to my dad because of he was very patient and delicate to her. It was not easy having a trauma. She couldn't she couldn't manage to go to a proper gynecologist. He didn't want they touch her. It's but she was very, very grateful to my dad for being in love with her and understanding the problem. I don't know what else can.
That's okay. I'm sure there's a lot more, but we can keep talking later. Carlos,
Okay.
thank you, David. It occurred to me that both
Okay.
David and Samuel are names after the people we heard about in the film.
Yes, David is about her brother, about my mom's brother, and Samuel
And
is from Samuel Maximilian, the doctor. She always thought that he saved her. So
yes, so that is
she used to, and there's some people she should be grateful also. People from United States that used to be I don't know if she was British, but she ended up in the States from the Joint Organization in Athens. Was a lady called Margaret Glicksman. Uh, she might be dead now because she should be like 120 now. And I kept writing to her for a few years, but in the 90s we stopped. I don't know why. Things happened and we lost touch.
well, thank you.
Just in case somebody know her from the people who are here, just a big kiss to.
There are many people here to have a big hug with from at least 4 continents right now.
Yes.
So, Carlos, the next generation.
Yeah. Um, I wrote some things down to make sure that I don't forget anything that I want to say. So if you don't mind, I will read from my notes now. I was born in Barcelona in 1988, and I grew up in a town called, my father mentioned earlier, Lloret de Mar, which is a beach town 70 kilometers from Barcelona. I lived there during my whole childhood and with my parents. My grandparents lived in the apartment upstairs from ours. I'm an only child, so I was their only grandchild. I think in general, I had a pretty normal childhood, a happy one. I remember my grandparents being very affectionate, especially my grandmother, who loved me to visit her. I guess like all grandmothers do. I fondly remember how she took me to the fair, for example, for a walk, and how she spoiled me with all kinds of things. I remember also that she was an excellent cook with a mix of Greek and Sephardi recipes. Um, the first time I recall knowing that my grandmother had survived Auschwitz, I might have like 9 or 10 years old. My parents told me that, and I remember thinking, this is a famous place. Then she started talking to me about her experience, about the hunger, the experiments. she talked about it like in a disorderly manner. One day she talked about an episode of that period, and another day she talked about some other episode. She often repeated herself. She always went to tears every time she talked about it, and I could feel sometimes that she got desperate because she knew I couldn't comprehend her experience. She talked to me about it until I was grown up. It's not like she was always talking about it. There were also happy times and happy moments, most of them. But she yeah, she talked about it pretty much until she died. Um, I don't think she had told many people from outside the family about it before. People close to the family knew she survived Auschwitz, and I think they didn't know about the experiments and all the details. Then, at the end of her life, when a very important award in Spain was given to Yad Vashem, she was part of the representatives who went to collect the award in the gala, and it was given by the Prince of Spain, which is now King Felipe VI. She was then in the spotlight, and she decided to share her story with the general public in Spain through press interviews and participating also in medical congresses and some kind of homages. I've also thought about how her experience has affected me and on an emotional level. And I think that what my grandmother suffered, and the fact that she opened herself to me, recalling her experiences in Auschwitz, I think it has shaped me in more ways that I'm aware of. First of all, it's one of the pillars on which I base my identity as a Jew, because where I grew up, the only Jews around were like members of my family. My dad had also more like shared experiences with other people, but in my case, it was only with uncles, cousins, and so on. So in order for me to have maintained a contact with other Jewish people, I must have gone to Barcelona and to spend some time with the religious community there, which I never did. So my relationship with Judaism in general was forged through my relationship with my family. We were not religious, like my dad said. So my grandmother's experience during Holocaust became very important in that regard. My grandfather's not so much, because he died when I was 14. He didn't talk much about his experiences during the war, but he left his memoirs written for me. And back then, when I was 14 and before, I wasn't really interested in family history or in world history or whatever. Then I became interested in these topics later, shortly before my grandmother passed away, and especially afterwards. I was 24 when my grandmother died. I also remember how my grandparents looked upon Israel like as a safe haven, like the last resort if the Jews were to be persecuted again. They often talked about it. Also, for my grandmother, even if she had spent very little time in Israel, for her, it was like the sun was always brighter there, and the fruit was always tastier in Israel, which was probably true, but you know what I mean. That also left an impression on me. Um, I don't think I'm able to identify the different ways her trauma affected me at an emotional level. I always find it difficult to connect with my emotions. I don't know. Maybe that's part of.
Maybe that's one of the ways.
Yeah, I want to say that maybe that's part of the effects of the trauma. Like, for example, I tend to focus on negative emotions a lot and paying very little attention on the positive ones. That's an example, but maybe that's just also a very common experience. Not, I don't know. In my early adulthood, I was diagnosed with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So I have these little obsessions. For example, pay a lot of attention to how I feel physically. If I have a little pain here or a little weird sensation there, it's like I focus on this, and I think this I might have inherited from her or from my dad. I don't know, because there's a worry about my health sometimes that most people I know don't have. Also, of course, I am a bit neurotic in a different way than my dad or than my grandmother was, but this bit of too much of attention or hypervigilance to my physical sensations, I'm pretty sure that it comes from my father's side of the family. I don't know what else I can tell you about my grandmother, because pretty much of it is in the documentary. And but well, I will be glad to answer any question that you may have, any member of the audience or
Yes.
Dr. Danieli.
Yeah, David, you were smiling when Carlos mentioned it. What went through your mind?
Yes, I'm pretty apprehensive. Yeah, I take care a lot, not a lot, but I like to think that my mother used to say always that everything comes from food. All the diseases, everything that happens in your life comes from food. So I always, I don't check really because I eat about everything. I don't have any problems. I love everything. I'm pretty open to this. I love going to Thailand to have Thai food, to China have Chinese food, all the four cuisines of China, everything. But I always like to balance a little bit if I'm taking a lot of I eat pork, but I always try to eat the healthiest pork, which is the Iberico, and not to over, to eat a lot of pork. But yeah, I think religions in the past were made for because there was no doctor. So if everybody eats pork and dies. Okay, so the rabbi in 3,000 years ago, he used to say, "Oh, let's we put it in the religion so that nobody eats pork and nobody dies." It was some healthy laws, in the Jewish religion. I also would like, before to explain a couple of things, like funny things about my mother in the aspect of. That she never hated the Germans, or if she hated the Germans in general, she never tried to give me the sensation that she hates Germans. I mean, we had uh, a shop by the beach in Spain, lots of Germans, and she always treated them very well. And she never, only sometimes when they asked for discounts, she used to get angry. But and we used to even sell, funny T-shirts that they jokes printed in a T-shirt, and sometimes they used to be very rude. Some people used to come and they were really, really angry with it. Like we had like a T-shirt of Adolf Hitler on the map of Europe, and used to write Adolf Hitler's European tour, and they said Warsaw 1939, Paris 1940, London cancelled, and Moscow cancelled. It was a joke, but some people didn't. Some people buy the T-shirt and they just take the lighter and burn it in my front. Well, we didn't have this special anger against Germans. It's something that happened, and we thought that the humanity learned, but it seems they didn't learn it really well. So, so we
Carlos,
must well, we must keep coming back to the problem of
yes,
anti-Semitism
I'm sure,
every now and then.
sure there are more things that will come to mind when we continue. But Carlos,
Okay.
it's not unusual for children of survivors, even survivors themselves, actually, or grandchildren, to as if not feel, just like your father just said, not feel hatred, not feel this, not feel that, right? But to convert it to the body, to be very concerned with the body. So that's not unusual at all. So let's talk more about it indeed. But I look forward very much to hear Alison's presentation, since she is the observer of this, and that is a separate perspective, which would be very interesting to hear. Thank you so much, Alison. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Yale, for hosting us today. And I have seen the film, like Carlos and David, a record amount of times, but it's always very moving. And every time we have a Q&A, I always hear something different from you too. So thank you both. I could not have made the film without Carlos's contribution and David's as well. And I really wanted to make a film that they were comfortable with and also that FOFO would like. When I first started speaking with Carlos, I said, can you give me a couple words that would describe your family? And united was one of those words. And I really think you see that in the film. Many people have remarked to me after they've seen the film that what a lovely family, that they clearly see that hate hasn't been passed down through the generations, despite FOFO's abuses and the deprivations. I know, Carlos, we've always talked about the frequent starvation. And there were very moving moments when I was looking through the archives, very touching moments with FOFO, but I was very happy when she could experience human kindness again. Okay, as you saw in the film, the very kind nurse that asked her what she wanted to eat, trying to get her to eat, and all she felt like was an onion. Like, that actually makes me feel quite tearful, you know, and that little bit of kindness that a nurse was treating her with such respect, propping her feet up on a newspaper, trying to make her physically comfortable. And that was the first time she'd experienced kindness in many years. And, you know, we're dealing with a teen girl that was ripped from her environment, lost her whole family, experimented on. I mean, the serious, like, human rights abuses. And for her to be the remarkable woman that she was, and to have a remarkable family as well, I just think I would have loved to have met her in person. So my motivations for making the film, my films usually center women, women who've overcome extreme deprivations and tortures. My last film, Exit, was about human trafficking. And I've always wondered what gets these survivors and victims through to the other side. Is it faith? Is it grit? Have they been rescued? Have they been liberated? Has there even been a little bit of luck? I mean, some people even say good genetics, you know, all those things. So I wanted not just to look at the crime and the horror that we often have, but recovery, okay? And Carlos was just able to open up a little bit about his OCD and how he thinks he could have had that passed down in some way. I also think too, with these sorts of films, as the Holocaust, you know, we're in an environment now where obviously there's a lot of Holocaust denial, full stop. We see the global anti-Semitism. I think it's hugely important that we show these films, but I also think it's left the consciousness of many people. And I also think not a lot of people know about their experiments as well. So that's why I think it's important to make the film. Also, there's very little out there about the Greek community as well, because we know that 90% were destroyed. I know we have Asha listening in as well now, who's like a survivor from Greece as well. And on a personal level, my father had significant PTSD because he was in World War II. He was already a grandparent 4 times over by the time I was born. And now that I'm an adult, I can recognize more of his triggers. From having spoken to Carlos, my father's PTSD was very advanced. He would often think I was his sister. It was pretty bad. My mum was pure steel, and whereas my father would often look after the veterans, my mother would always be bringing people into the house. It could be battered wives, refugees. She was always looking to help people find a sense of community, a decent job without exploitation, some hope and dignity. And I'll quickly tell you about my very first interaction with a Holocaust survivor, and you'll understand as well why I made this film, because the film is for the classroom, it is for educational purposes. Obviously, it's not a film out there, to be on Netflix or whatever with a commercial value. It's purely there for the educational aspect of it, and that's why I made the film and what I had in mind when I was making it. And also, we had a very tiny grant from the Claims Conference, and there's only so much you can do without a budget. So anyway, we had a neighbor, Zelda, who was a Holocaust survivor. My mother had worked with Zelda many years before. She retired. My mother was a jeweler by trade, and she'd had quite a lot of Jewish friends. And she'd also was very active in helping out at a Catholic convent, which unfortunately I had to go to as well. And a lot of these women who are actually Jewish, they used to work at my school, at this Catholic school. Anyway, Zelda was a very discreet woman. She would often walk past and wave, and just very friendly with my mother, but she sort of was a solitary figure. And I remember my mum saying to me one day, I haven't seen Zelda for a few days. Take her a pie and see that she's okay. Because she didn't want to interrupt her and be nosy and go and knock on the door. So she sent me with this pie. And this particular pie was a choco pie, which I hated as a child. And I said to my mum, does it have to be choco? Can we take her some apple or something? And my mum was like, no, go. She likes the choco. And I remember taking it up to the door, and I was quite shy. She opened the door, and I was sort of with an apology for interrupting her, and also that it was choco. And she stopped and she looked at me for quite a while. And I know I mentioned this to you before, Yale. She was very much taking me in. And I hadn't had anyone look at me like that before. And I went home and I said to my mum, I said, she was looking at me quite strangely, but like not in a bad way, but she was looking at me a lot. And then I said, Mum, why is she so sad? And then that was the day my mum sat me down and explained to me that Zelda had 2 children, 2 twins, who were actually victims of Mengele's experiments. And I was maybe 7 or 8, and I just remember this like head on fire feeling like, who can do this to children? I've never forgotten, obviously. And then later on, I've lived we had a Jewish neighbours. I used to live in Bondi in Sydney, if anyone knows it, it's like a Jewish neighbourhood. And when I moved to Spain, it was quite a shock for me, because I don't see much of a Jewish community here at all, which is quite strange considering Sephardi history. And also there's quite a lot of anti-Semitism here. So I think people, they're reluctant to show that they're openly Jewish as well. So they're my motivations for making the film. I wanted to make a very honest film. It was a very collaborative film. I want the film to be of use. And yeah, we've had very positive feedback about the film. And I'm just glad we can pass down Fofo's story, because I think education and memory are the best tools against hate. So that's it, basically. I can't hear you, Yale. Oh, you're muted. She's muted.
Thank you, Alison, for that too. And thank you for your focus on victims. As you know, as a victimologist, it means a great deal to me and to our center, which is why we are hosting these webinars. And indeed, I'm very glad that we were able to enlighten some people, including in our audience, who didn't know that Greek Jews, and Salonika Jews in particular, were almost decimated during World War II. Bless God, not all, but indeed, this is indeed so important to keep teaching the history so people understand it and know it. I wonder, when each other was talking, do you want to add anything to each other's comments before we go to the audience?
Fine.
I have a funny thing about the onion thing,
Yes,
because
please.
I remember when I was little, I hated onions. Like I didn't like onions, and my my grandmother also always say that comes from your mother. That comes from your mother because onions are delicious, and she was like like a bit upset. Now I like onions, but when you're little, they're not like very. It's not suitable for some children don't like it. And I remember she was upset upset with that.
I remember you saying, Carlos, that she insisted for you to have orange juice every day as well.
Yeah, that's
And Fofo's therapy was swimming in the sea. You said she would swim every morning, or was it every evening at the same time? And that was her ritual.
yeah. In the morning, she liked to go swimming with some friends or neighbors in she lived in front of the beach, so it was very close.
And David, I remember you telling me as well, you weren't sure how much of it was being a Jewish mother, or you were saying when we were talking about her preoccupation with health, I remember you saying you didn't know how much of it
Yes.
was being a Jewish mother or another factor.
No, I have
Or
been,
a Jewish survivor of experiments
yes,
and
being, I grew up with the conscience that I was not a normal child, because I come from from a person who had radiology, uh, a bit a Chernobyl child, right?
Yeah.
And I always I always check my blood tests, and if something goes smoothly wrong, I just try to find out why. And but it's okay. I don't think I'm. Some friends I know, they were not worried about this, and they always used to joke and laugh at me. And now I think they are more worried than me. So maybe when I was 40 or 50, I was different. But now I think I'm most of the guys from my generation are the same. You know, they just want to stay here.
the audience as well, and you would be very interested to watch many of our other webinars. This is our number 61 or 62, and learn about not only Holocaust survivors and their children and grandchildren, but survivors of other human catastrophes that experience similar horrific anti-human behavior and their legacies. This, what you're describing, unfortunately, has become normal. and I'm afraid it's more and more around the world. But
Yeah, but I think now it's more common also it's more common also in the young people and not survivors of Holocaust or something. People are just taking more care, try to live healthier, and it's good.
yeah,
You know,
and
it's not a bad thing.
yeah,
They,
we have a special section on our website on the rights of future generations. And one of the things I promote at the United Nations is the right of future generations to healed parents.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
you're following of course you're following the logic. With
Yes,
certain
yes.
people, you don't need to explain a lot. But Carlos, often when I have with patients through the years, I would ask them, "What does your head say? What does your shoulders say? What does your back say? What is your body trying to tell you?" Okay, you might want to make that an inner conversation so you become more aware of what your body is trying to tell you. And maybe the historical and current context, it helps really. But let's open it to the audience because we are, and I see John German joined us. That's wonderful. And hello, John. And I see that he also mentioned the school in Pakistan that the Afghani girls and women, over actually 360 students, women being taught by young women, refugees from Afghanistan who are not allowed to go to school anymore. And therefore they started a school for mothers to educate their children at home, to educate their daughters. It's a wonderful school. And indeed, it's our last webinar. We use this as an example on the International Day of Education. So thank you, John, for mentioning it. And you can see we put on the chat the reference to that webinar. Thank you. And I'm wondering, in addition to the compliments, which of course everything is totally deserved, what if you have any particular questions, so you join the conversation. If you want to speak, let us know so we can put you on. We can open the voice for you. I see we have Jacqueline, who is a Rwandan survivor. Jacqueline, you want to say anything? Go ahead, sweetheart, and unmute. Jacqueline is on our advisory council and the chair of the Rwanda working group. Jacqueline, are you there? Rabbi, is Jacqueline there?
She's
Maybe.
here, but her microphone is muted.
Jacqueline, your microphone is muted. Well, maybe she's.
He stepped away.
Oh, hi. Go
Asha,
ahead.
we have a gentleman, Asha, in the audience who was here earlier. He's a Greek survivor as well. I wonder if he's listening at the moment, because I've heard from him the last couple of days regarding his story. I see he's posted earlier in the chat.
Oh, wonderful, Professor Asher.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay. Hey,
That's all. Thank you for joining us.
can you hear me? Can you
Yeah,
hear?
we can hear you.
I am so delighted to make your acquaintance, even at a
Excellent.
distance. And congratulations to the son and the grandson of this wonderful lady. I did not have the pleasure of meeting my maternal grandparents. They perished from Salonika in the early transports taken there in March of 1943. I was born December 3rd, 1943, in a mountain cave outside of Volos, Greece. Volos is in the midway between Salonika in the north and Athens in the south. We were taken there to hide by, again, righteous among the nations, a couple of a childless couple that my father had befriended. And when they learned about what happened to the Jews of Salonika, where my mother came from, she married my father and survived, and taking along her younger sister, Mary. So the couple told them to go to the mountains where they own property and they would hide them. And they did. And it was fascinating that people who otherwise were very inclined to cooperate and collaborate with the Germans, there were exceptions. As I tell my audiences, and I do a lot of speaking for Names Not Numbers project, I say with a lament that there were not enough such non-Jewish Greeks to save them. There was police chief Everett in Athens. There was Damaskinos, the archbishop. There was Chrysostomus in Zakynthos. There was the German consul of Volos, who had compassion and warned the chief rabbi Moshe Pesach of blessed memory and Joachim, the metropolitan, to urge their people, their neighbors, to save Jews, and they did. When the Germans came to Volos and tried to round up Jews, only the infirm and the elderly showed up. So they started to comb the countryside, and many many young Jewish parents were betrayed by the cries of their children as the Germans penetrated the mountain. My mother, blessed memory, who died 8 years ago, used to tell me, Asher, you are our savior. You save our family. I said, Mom, what did I do? You were quiet. You were quiet. And yet there came a time when a German patrol discovered us. Anything could have happened. My father, during daylight hours, was not present. He was hiding. He was, I'm sorry, supporting the resistance and the underground. So this nativity scene took place, mother and child, and the German soldiers. The head of patrol looked at the makeshift crib and smiled, always a good sign, and emotion that he left a baby like me in Hamburg. The next word out of his mouth was rouse, rouse, out, never to bother us again. Because of the action of one German, I grew up not hating Germans and not having this hatred. And anybody, even in Germany, there were people who were saved by Germans, Jewish people. And of course, I recommend that exhaustive study, Daniel Goldhagen's book on Hitler's willing executioners is the name, the title, and it's amazing how. But again, Greece has had a long history of 2,000 years of anti-Semitism, which continues to this day. Greece was the only country that voted against the establishment of the State of Israel in Resolution 181 on November 29th, 1947. And I'm trying and have signatures from 10 nations supporting a petition of conscience, an appeal to correct history and heal hearts, asking, demanding that the Greek government repudiate that decision. Even, great nations always do, like the United States with the Japanese Americans, and then issue a belated apology to Israel and to all Jewish people in the world. It's amazing, and I am so grateful that I have the koach, the strength to do this, and I am happy that people like Alison put it on tape, on film, and it's important. Of course, I'm filmed by the students in the various schools who are amazed. As many Greeks, non-Jewish Greeks, are amazed when they hear that I'm a Jewish Greek. He said, "No, you're not. You are Greek." I said, "You can be an American Jew and a Canadian Jew, a Scottish Jew, but you cannot be a Greek Jew." There are fewer than 5,000 Jews remaining, and still a month doesn't go by without desecration of synagogues, of Holocaust memorials, and cemeteries. Speaking of cemetery, the Salonika Cemetery, 500-year-old cemetery in 1950, was razed, and on it was built the modern Aristotle University with the stones, the gravestones of our co-religionists, beautifying the university, churches, and private homes. It is terrible sometimes. It's terrible, even though the government, on the government level, relations are very, very warm with Israel. I hope I did not overwhelm you.
No,
Thank you, Asher.
Thank you, Alison, for inviting Asher, and thank you, Asher, for speaking. Please stay in touch with us because this is an omission that we would gladly help repair.
Absolutely.
So
Thank you.
this is
you made me cry, really. Just the thought of all these memories, again, there is trauma for the survivors as well as those who perish. Of course, it's so important, and I have a very soft spot in my heart for the Claims Conference. They're doing such wonderful work. And as you say, there are 245,000 survivors, and they're decreasing rapidly, so we must fight denial of the Holocaust and minimization of the Holocaust. Oh, they tell me, Professor, it wasn't 6 million, it was just a few 100,000. No. We will not permit the 6 million to die a second time by denying their existence.
So Asher, I hear there's someone with you.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. So we are not alone, because I'm a little worried that you're so upset, which is totally natural and understandable, but I just wouldn't want you to be alone with that.
Thank you.
Asher, I have your email, and I think we should have a talk with David and Carlos and share your materials
Of
on
course, I'm
the Girl.
very, very inclined to do that and to make more films and documentaries. And really, there are so many stories. Of course, they're all different, yet they're part of the same chain of that connects us all, really.
Yeah, and let me say, extend our invitation as well to stay in touch. So your voice is with all of us, and you're with all of us.
Thank you. I really feel you are very close to me. I really, it's amazing. And somehow I seem to recall your name, Danielle. I don't know where.
I've written a great deal in this area.
I
You know, we may have met.
We cross our paths. Yes, we cross paths.
I think so. We may very well have. And thank you so much. And indeed, you mentioned, David, you mentioned that you encountered no anti-Semitism. You called it racist when you spoke.
That was
Spain. But I'm wondering what's happening now.
Yes, that was in the film. The film was made. The film was made. My take was in summer 2023, and we all know what happened 3
the good days. Yeah.
months later. So now things have changed, not drastically, but because anti-Semitism was always in the Spanish blood. I mean, from 6 centuries ago, you can track the anti-Semitism. But personally, I still have not. I don't have a problem. I'm okay. You know, my neighbors, in my village, I never had a problem. But the truth is that in Spain is a hostile country now for us. News, everything it's through Al Jazeera and through Hamas government, all the news, are brought to us through their voice, and it's always if if they stab if a car hits 8 people in Tel Aviv and they kill the guy, the soldiers or whoever was with a gun there. On the TV, it's a Palestinian died. It's not the 8 people who died, Israelis. It's going to be like this, and we have maybe in Catalan TV is terrible because the CEO, he's really for 20 years since the second Intifada, he's been always, against Israel, and he keeps every day like this. It's terrible. You cannot. I mean, and even on Twitter, he's there, and he's just proud because they liberated the 4 girls in very healthy condition, and saying hello and how happy they were there, but they don't say they were under a gun, and maybe they told them before, if you don't smile, we kill a hostage, just but people believe them, so it's not much we can do about it if the media doesn't change. If some court, international court, or not this international court, another a little bit cleaner, tries to put everybody on the on the limits.
Yeah. Carlos, can you reflect on that? Do you feel it at all? Is it present in your life?
Yeah, I never, like my dad, I never suffered any kind of attack or whatever, or discrimination even. But there's always this like subtle underneath the when you talk with someone and you tell them, someone like a friend of a friend, or even your own friends, and they know you're a Jew, they have this like these little comments that, oh, you must have a lot of money, or or what are you doing with the Palestinians, without knowing my opinion about the subject, without ever talking about haven't talking about this. And there's always this like, yeah, this very subtle, sometimes not so subtle, but there's always this like, you have, if you tell someone that you're Jewish, you have to be prepared for some of these comments.
Thank you.
And also the
Alison,
media.
I see your hand, Alison. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier, I'm very shocked at the anti-Semitism in Spain, especially some of the hateful comments we have from our equality minister as well. I mean, she's the Minister of Equality. I think you can mourn civilian loss in Palestine and also call for the release of the hostages and acknowledge what happened on October 7th. I have a documentary in production now around October 7th, and some of the comments I've received from organizations are just terrible. There's this complete lack of belief when we have this philosophy to believe all survivors, but for some reason, you know, we can't believe Jewish or Israeli survivors, and it's I call it a real intersection between misogyny and hypocrisy. It's been very eye-opening for me, and I'm not Jewish. I had a Christian upbringing, but for me, you know, we're all the same. You know, you can't. I don't know why it's so selective. Especially
your heart is with me. The
Sorry?
more I know you, the more I understand, because your heart is with human rights, and
yeah.
I understand very deeply, actually. Thank you for being here. Carlos, I see your hand is here. And I still want
Yeah.
to Lian speak. Go ahead, please.
Just a little note on what I said earlier, because I want to clarify that most of the times I have received these comments or like this, I don't, the explanation is normally ignorance, not malicious. They're not malicious normally. It's like this ignorance on the matter, on the Jewish history, culture, on even on the Palestinian Israeli conflict. Like there's like these two sides. So everyone has to be on one side or the other. So you can never see the gray issues in between. So most people here is like, you're left leaning, then you're anti-Israeli. You're right wing, then you're anti-Palestinian. There's few people. So I mostly attribute these comments and these confusions to ignorance. There are some malicious people always, but most of them are just ignorance. It's the explanation I find.
Thank you. You know, speaking about Barcelona, I remember going to this underground synagogue. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's a synagogue there underground.
I don't know. Maybe
Anyway,
Casa
I will
Benadret,
send.
but I don't know.
Okay, so I often teach people about where they live. So I will send you pictures.
Okay.
So, but Alison, I would like for the future, I would like us for the future to think about Spain. You know, Spain was silenced after Franco. And we have a second and third generation of the Franco regime. And I don't know that you have made a film about it. I don't think so. But first of all, I suggest you do. Second of all, I would really love for us to talk more about that. About the multi-generational effects of the Franco regime and of the silence, the political silence that was enforced afterwards. It's one of those, you know, big elephants in the room.
Yeah, the organization where I work, this Amical de Mauthausen,
That's what I thought about, yes.
they talk about this very much because when after the Civil War, at the end of the Civil War, a lot of Republicans went exiled to France because they were fearing that the repression and the executions and imprisonments, and then it started World War II, and the Germans entered France. So they took all these Spanish, some they were communists, some they were not communists, they were just people who fled. And they asked Franco what to do with them. And Franco said, they're not in Spain, they're not Spanish anymore. And then after Franco died, it's been very hard to remember these people. So the place where I'm working has focused, it was founded by survivors of the camps, Mauthausen mostly. And there's this absence for many years, and it's just an example. But in many things after the Franco era, the people don't want to talk about it. And now, after the years, people starting to there's people buried in the sides of the roads until today.
Yes.
And the government and the never wanted to bury them. To give them a proper burial and whatever. So now we're starting to to do all this. Took many years.
I'm glad to hear that. So let's stay in touch about that too. But there is an a chat. Leanne, are you still here? Because here we are at yet another perspective on the same history, right? Leanne wrote, hello, everybody. I'm Leanne from Germany. I learned about the Holocaust at school, and once long years ago, I visited Birkenau. Leanne, are you still here?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Please join this conversation because you're adding yet another perspective on the same history. Please.
What shall I say? I heard what my grandmother told me. I heard what my mother told me, and once I felt that their experiences followed me too. I did things which I never knew why I did them. For example, I collected tins with food. I wanted to have a small, in Germany it is called Bollerwagen. That is a small car in which you can put things. I don't know the English words. And later I realized that I retreated the experiences of my grandmother, who had to escape who had to escape in the war from. Oh, sorry, I'm not quite clever now. What they had experienced, it was in me too, but I didn't know it. It was a silent experience, maybe in a mental way, generational experience. And to live in a city where I know that there was a church, a Jewish church, and now I live near the place too, and I knew that my mother told me she could see the church burning when when Nazis put it on fire. It was quite near to me, and the most impressive thing for me was that my grandmother told me that she was very afraid of her husband. He had a pistol in their room, and then she wanted to be divorced because she was a Christian woman. She tried to help Jewish people in the way in which she could. She went with bread down the streets and let the bread fall down so that Jewish people could later pick it up and eat. She was very brave, because in these times to be divorced as a woman who had 2 children was very hard. She in some way was in danger, but she was very, very brave. When my mother was her second child and my uncle was her first child. My uncle had to exercise on the place in front of their house because the Nazis wanted to exercise boys and girls. And my grandmother didn't want that. She hated the ideology of hate and hate in general. And she hated that other people wanted to educate her son. So she shouted out of the window to her son, come home, Gerd was his name, come home, come up to the stairs. And the boy, her boy, was in a difficult situation. He had to obey the person who wanted to exercise the group of boys. But on the other side, he wanted to obey his mother. So he ran home only a few meters and then went to my grandmother. It was the time when she was already divorced. And then the leader of the examination group went to my grandmother and was very angry and said, "You are not allowed to shout and to call your boy when we have exercises." And my grandmother said, "No, I'm the mother. I have to educate him, not you." I'm very when I talk about I feel their courage. She could have been put into prison because she was so angry about those who had the power in this time.
So much to learn. Ooh.
And crazy for me as a child when I heard it was too that my grandmother wanted to be divorced from my grandfather. I never got to know my grandfather. He later went to a nearby other city and I never got to know him. And her brothers were in the resistance. So it must have been very disrupting her mind when she saw that she was a woman between men who are so different in their ideology.
Yep. So I'm a little envious of the audience. You have learned so many perspectives. Before we depart, I want to invite everyone for our next webinar, which will be held on the 4th of February, and that would be on FGM, or genital mutilation. From, again, of course, from the victim standpoint and professional standpoint. So please join us. But I also promised you to invite our amazing panel to say your last words, even though it's not going to be your last words. We are going to continue working together, but your last words about today. What would you like people to leave with? And just to say to John German, sorry, because I don't want to to not leave you unanswered. When you look at our website, you can see the Danieli inventory for multi-generational legacies of trauma, which is translated into many languages and being studied in many languages. I gather that if you want to study the trauma of the intergenerational or multi-generational study of the Afghan people, we'll have to work on translating it into Farsi and the other languages in Afghanistan. And we can work on it together, and you're absolutely, totally, full-heartedly welcome to work with me on that, since the Danieli inventory is the gold measure of that from a psychosocial standpoint. Alison, you were the last, so how about if you're first now?
All right. I've just received some messages, people telling me that they couldn't join because of scheduling conflicts or Zoom issues, but the chat, the webinar part will be published on your website, so we can share that. I also wanted to encourage anyone that has materials relative to our conversation today, feel free to share it to me and I'll publish it where I can. Again, there's not a huge audience for the film, but the small audience that we do have are very interested in particular Block 10 and the Greek Jews. And yeah, thank you for hosting, Yale, and thank you very much, Asha, and everyone else for sharing their important stories. And yeah, I think it's been a very informative webinar for us all. I've heard new things myself. So yeah, thank you to everyone.
And Carlos, you're in the middle. You'll be next.
Yeah, I came up with not like, I remember the sentence, not an idea that I read in a book called Jews Don't Count from David Badiel, and he says basically that history is not in the past, like we can leave the consequences of the history in the present. And I think it's like in this seminar, it's one of the ideas that we can say I don't know we can conclude like this.
Thank you. And David Shmuel.
I don't have a sentence on this matter especially, but about the Jewish situation now, I could take any Golda Meir sentence, and it would be great to end this webinar. And maybe if I want to be a little bit more on the middle side, not Palestinian, not Jew, and just a citizen of the world, that we are like ants, and we don't matter that much. But it's a sentence from a book. It's from the 80s, but the guy, he's updating in every now and then, which is Arab and Jew by David Shipler. And he says, watching foreign affairs sometimes is like watching a magician. The eye is drawn to the hand performing the dramatic flourishes, leaving the other hand, the one that doing the important job, unnoticed.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for the audience that stayed with us. And I look forward to further future collaboration. So
Thank you for inviting us. And
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Yeah, it was very good. Thank you. All right.